Welcome to Hampton Bay Stories. If you enjoy this series, we invite you to like and share this story. Then subscribe to our channel or explore our books on your preferred online book retailer. This story is called What She Learned. It was early morning in Hampton Bay, Virginia. The alarm had not gone off, but Diana was already awake. She had barely slept. A thin line of September sunlight had started to push through the window slats, catching on the curve of her cheekbone. She did not move. Her head was still against the pillow, but her mind had been turning for hours. She could still hear her father's voice, not the tone he used to shout, but the quieter one. The one that reminded her of how deeply the rules ran in their household. That voice was more dangerous than his rage. It was quiet when he told her, year after year, that her place was at home. That women who ran off without a man ended up living in the streets or worse. It was quiet when he told her to stop acting like she was better than the family. Quiet when he told her she would never be free. And yet she was. Diana blinked up at the ceiling. Even in the silence of her apartment, she could hear echoes of her family's history. Before the United States took Texas. Before Mexico took it from Spain. Before Spain conquered what was left of the Natchitoches people, her father's family had already been there. The Silvas had roots in the land long before names like Houston and Austin were carved into it. That kind of lineage could feel like strength. To her father, it had become a chain. He had always rejected the word Mexican. He told his children they were Texan and nothing else. Yet both he and Diana's mother spoke perfect Spanish. Her mother would still hum old songs under her breath while she cooked, and her father still cursed in Spanish when he was truly angry. Diana was never allowed to speak it at home. It was one of many contradictions in their house, one of many rules she was expected to obey without question. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was an email. She rolled over and turned the screen downward without opening it. She knew what it was. The official letter from the board. The letter that made it final. Diana Silva, head of information and library resources at the Hampton Bay Naval Academy, was no longer employed. All because of one choice. One man. She sat up in bed and placed her feet on the floor. The wood was cool. She did not bother reaching for a sweater. The Virginia air in September was still warm, but something inside her was chilled. It had started like so many of her past relationships. Innocent. Promising. He had been charming, attentive, and disarmingly intelligent. A visiting civilian contractor with a short-term research project at the academy. He respected her work. He brought her coffee. He remembered the name of her graduate advisor at Bancroft. But by the third month, she knew he had been looking for a place to stay, not just physically, but emotionally. He needed someone to prop him up. Someone to give him access. Diana knew the signs. She had seen them before. This time, she had let him in anyway. And this time, when she broke it off, he went to the board. A conflict of interest, they called it. An inappropriate relationship between a department head and a civilian partner, despite the fact that she had reported every meeting and every shared file. He had said it was consensual. He had said she never pressured him. But still, it was enough for the academy to sever ties with her. Quietly. Without scandal, but with finality. Diana stood and walked to the kitchen. The coffee pot had already brewed itself at 6:30. She poured a cup and stood at the window, looking out toward the quiet street below. Even now, she felt the urge to call her mother. Not for comfort, but just to hear her voice. Just to pretend for a second that someone on this earth would be proud of her. But her mother would not answer. She never answered anymore. Her mother had learned long ago to stay quiet. After Diana left at 16, there had been no second daughter to challenge the rules. Her brothers had all stayed in town. One worked for a trucking company. Another ran a small shop. None of them had finished college. None of them called unless they needed something. Diana sipped her coffee and stared out the window. At 32, she was the most successful person in her family. She had 2 degrees. She had run an elite information network for one of the country's most prestigious naval academies. She had published research in digital archives and metadata ethics. She had spoken at conferences. And yet here she was, alone in her apartment, out of work, wondering again why her choices with men always cost her more than they should. She walked back into her bedroom and opened the closet. Her resume was already updated. Her interview blazer still hung dry-cleaned and ready. Her Bancroft diploma caught the light on the far wall. There would be another job. There would be another chapter. But today, Diana Silva had to sit with the failure, with the weight of being the only one who ever left, and still never quite far enough. She turned on her laptop and opened the email. The letter was official. Immediate termination. Severance pay through the end of the month. An invitation to apply again after a 12-month cooling period. Diana closed the message. When Diana Silva was growing up, she had to scrape for everything she had. The sun had already started to dip low, and the hot Texas wind moved through the cracks in the screen door like it had done for generations. The house was small and weather-worn, sitting on land that once belonged to her ancestors before it was claimed by flag after flag. Her family had been in Tejas long before it became Texas, before Mexico took it, before Spain claimed it, and even before then, when it was only land, water, sky, and people. Her father never spoke of any of that with pride. He only spoke of what he believed to be strength. And strength to him looked like silence, obedience, and control. Despite speaking fluent Spanish, he did not allow it in the house. Mexican mannerisms were forbidden. If Diana so much as rolled her R's too much or gestured with her hands while talking, he would correct her with a hard look or worse. He said they were Americans, and that meant acting right. But in every way that mattered, he still lived by the rules of the old world. The kind he claimed to reject. He was the head of the household. His word was final. There was no negotiation, no conversation. His voice was the law, and the women in the family, Diana, her mother, and her sisters, were expected to follow without question. Her mother did as she was told. Always. She never corrected him, never raised her voice. Sometimes Diana wondered who her mother had been before she met him, but the woman who stood at the kitchen stove, shoulders rounded with years of silence, never gave any clues. The boys in the family had privileges. They were allowed to speak freely, to eat first, to leave the house when they wanted. Diana's oldest brother had a key to the truck at 15. Diana was 13 and still had to ask permission to go next door. Every part of Diana's childhood felt like a lesson in how to be small. She learned to walk without sound. She learned to speak only when spoken to. She learned to cook, clean, and stay out of the way when her father was in one of his moods. And yet, something inside her always resisted. She loved school, not because it was easy, but because it was hers. Her teachers encouraged her. Her notebooks were full of careful notes and practiced cursive. Every A she earned felt like a stone she could place in her own foundation. She believed, even then, that she was building a way out. By the time she was in 7th grade, she had already told herself that high school would be the beginning of the end. As soon as she graduated, she would leave. No one would stop her. But escape did not come easily. Not in a house like hers. Not in a town like theirs. Diana stared out the kitchen window as the cicadas buzzed louder in the heat. The road beyond the yard stretched toward town, empty and cracked. She wondered what it would feel like to walk down that road and never turn around. Behind her, her father's voice boomed from the living room. Her brother had spilled soda on the rug, and someone had to clean it. Her mother called her name. Diana closed her eyes. She counted to 3. Then she turned from the window and answered. Diana decided as soon as she got to high school that she would leave as soon as she graduated. She did not know where she would go. She did not know how she would get there. But she knew with absolute clarity that she would not stay. She could not become her mother. She would not live in a house where her voice had no place, where her body belonged to tradition, and where her mind was seen as a threat. She carried that decision with her like a hidden coin in her pocket. She did not speak it aloud. She never wrote it down. But it was always there. School became her sanctuary. She took the most advanced classes her schedule allowed. She stayed after school for tutoring, not because she needed the help, but because she needed the space. It was the only time she could be in a room where her voice was not immediately dismissed. Her teachers started to notice her. Her essays were often the ones read aloud. Her history teacher pulled her aside once and asked if she had ever thought about college. Diana nodded. She had thought about it every single day. After school, she worked. She had begged for a job at the local breakfast spot, a place with cracked vinyl booths and a cook who shouted orders like they were military commands. She was too young to wait tables officially, but the owner let her bus tables and bring drinks. Within 2 weeks, she was taking orders. Within a month, she was getting tipped. Her family insisted that she hand over most of what she made. Her father called it contributing. Her mother called it helping out. Diana said nothing. She gave what they expected. But she always stashed away at least 25% of her tips. Sometimes it was a few crumpled ones. Sometimes a 5. Every once in a while, a generous trucker left her a 10 or 20 just for keeping his coffee filled and not asking questions. That money went straight into her hiding spots. She had no bank account. She was too young to open one, and she would not dare ask her mother to co-sign. Her mother could not keep secrets, not from her husband. Diana knew that if she tried to hide money in the house, it had to be in multiple places. She rotated her hiding spots weekly. Some money went inside an old shoe at the back of the closet. Some behind the loose panel in the bathroom. Some she rolled into a tight bundle and hid inside the empty lining of her school backpack. It was a delicate system. And it was hers. Each week, she counted her savings in silence after everyone else had gone to sleep. She did it by the light of a flashlight with a sock wrapped around the end to keep it dim. She never counted out loud. There was no sense of safety. Just progress. Every dollar meant one less reason to stay. At school, she started listening more closely to students who talked about college. She paid attention to where people were applying. She took home every flyer from the counselor's office, even if it was for something she could not afford. She would make it work. She had to. One night, as she scraped the last of the grits from a booth table, a woman in a blazer asked her how old she was. Diana said she was 14. The woman nodded and left a $20 bill folded under her napkin. When Diana opened it later that night and counted the bill, her hands shook. It was the most she had made in one tip. She did not know what the woman had seen in her, but she knew what she saw in herself. A girl with a plan. A girl with no intention of staying. Diana was too young to open a bank account on her own, and she knew better than to ask her mother for help. Her mother could not lie to her father. Not because she lacked the ability, but because she lacked the permission. So Diana continued to hide the money. She had a system. Every week, after work, she would count out her earnings and divide them. The amount her father expected went into her wallet. The rest was tucked away, carefully and methodically. Some bills were folded and pressed inside old schoolbooks she knew no one else would touch. A few bills were sealed into a small envelope behind a loose panel in the hallway closet. One particularly thick roll was hidden inside a cracked cassette case behind a stack of old VHS tapes. She never used the same hiding spot 2 weeks in a row. It turned out to be a prudent idea. One evening, after a particularly busy weekend shift, Diana came home late. Her shoes were sticky from syrup and coffee, and her apron smelled like fried potatoes. She went straight to her closet to check her stash. One of the smaller rolls was gone. At first, she thought she had made a mistake. Maybe she had moved it and forgotten. She checked her other spots. Everything else was still in place. But the money in the closet, nearly $50, was gone. The next morning, she saw the smirk on her younger brother's face. He was 2 years behind her in school and spent most of his time sulking or stirring trouble. That day, he was unusually smug. When Diana cornered him that afternoon, he did not deny it. He had found her money. He had taken it. And if she did not agree to give him $20 every Friday, he said he would tell their father she was stealing from the family. Diana's hands clenched at her sides. She could feel the heat rising in her neck. No, she said. He laughed. I'll tell him tonight. And he did. That night, their father was already angry, about what no one could say, and when Diana came in from her shift, he was waiting. He did not ask any questions. He did not need to. Her brother's word was enough. She did not cry. Not when he slapped her. Not when the back of his hand caught the edge of her cheekbone and sent her sideways. Not when her mother turned away and busied herself at the stove. The next morning, her eye was swollen and dark. From that day forward, her father waited up for her after every shift. He would stand in the doorway with his arms crossed, and she would be expected to hand over every dollar. Sometimes he asked how much she made. Sometimes he just opened his hand. Diana still found ways to hide a little. $1 here, $2 there. But it was harder now. The risk had increased. Still, she was undaunted. She went to school with her bruised face and sat through her classes like nothing was wrong. When her counselor called her in privately, Diana stared at the floor while the woman spoke softly, gently, trying to make space for the truth. "I can call Child Protective Services," the counselor said. "You don't have to go back there." But Diana shook her head. She was almost out. She had a plan. She had a number in her mind, an amount of money she needed to leave. Her college applications were already being drafted. She would not let the state take her and throw her into another house, another kind of control. She had come too far. Her life was bad enough as it was. But at least it was hers. She begged the counselor not to call. Eventually, the woman agreed, but she kept a watchful eye on Diana after that. Sometimes she would leave granola bars or fruit in Diana's locker. Once, she slipped an envelope with a bookstore gift card inside. Diana never spoke of the home. She never mentioned the black eye. But in the locker room mirror, she saw herself clearly. She was still standing. And she still had a plan. Diana was in her senior year when one of her classmates leaned across the table and asked if she could help with a research paper. It was a question asked casually, almost in passing. They were seated at the back of the school library, and the harsh light overhead hummed faintly. The girl, a basketball player named Aaliyah, had never seemed the type to ask for help. Her voice was quiet that day, and her eyes did not meet Diana's directly. "It's not that I'm dumb," Aaliyah said. "I just don't have time to figure out all these citations." Diana understood immediately. She nodded once and said yes. Then she told Aaliyah it would cost $20. The first paper was short. It was a 3-page assignment about a historical speech. Diana edited the grammar, improved the structure, and cleaned up the citations. Aaliyah handed her the money in the hallway the next morning and slipped another paper into her backpack. Within 2 weeks, Diana had picked up 3 more students. Some wanted editing. Some needed help organizing their ideas. Others handed over rough notes and wanted Diana to write the entire paper from scratch. She charged more for those. Her tutoring business quickly outpaced her waitressing job. A good week of tutoring brought in nearly twice what she earned in tips. She no longer had to smell like fryer oil or scrub sugar off the table corners. She worked in clean clothes with a pen in hand, not a rag. But she could not quit the breakfast spot. Her father would not allow it. When Diana first reduced her hours at the diner, she explained it by saying she was getting tutoring after school. She said her classes had become more difficult and she needed extra help to pass. Her mother accepted the explanation with little interest. Her father scoffed. "If you can't handle the classes, drop them. You're wasting your time." Diana said nothing in response. She had learned not to argue. She kept the tutoring money hidden just like she had done with her tip money. Her backpack had a false lining where she kept small amounts of cash. Larger amounts were stashed in her sock drawer, inside an old shoebox labeled school supplies. Another small bundle was tucked into a hollowed-out dictionary on the shelf above her bed. Her brother still watched her. She knew he was waiting for another chance to catch her hiding something. She moved her stashes often and never kept all her money in one place. Most evenings, she tutored in the back of the school library or at the fast food restaurant across from the campus. She brought an extra notebook for each student and always kept her tone calm and professional. Some students paid in singles, others handed her folded 20s without saying a word. Diana woke early each morning to proof essays before school. Some days, she walked to school while it was still dark, the sound of her footsteps the only thing breaking the quiet. She rarely smiled at school anymore. Her mind was always working, planning, calculating, building. One morning, while editing a paper on civil liberties, she paused at a sentence she had rewritten for one of her clients. Freedom is not given. It is claimed, fought for, and maintained. She stared at the words for a moment. Then she underlined the sentence and wrote it again in the margin of her own notebook. Thank you. We now continue with Chapter 6, staying true to the pacing, tone, and structure you have set. This chapter shows Diana navigating the limits of her school's expectations and her home life, using her intelligence and quiet determination to push forward. As always, there will be no em-dashes, only full sentences and carefully structured prose. In early fall, Diana, like most of the other seniors, took the college admission tests. She had never been enrolled in the official college track. Her high school advisor had quietly placed her in the secretarial track 2 years earlier. When she asked why, the answer was polite but clear. College is expensive. That path doesn't suit every student. But you'd make an excellent office administrator. Diana did not argue. She knew better than to push back too hard, and she understood numbers. She had a good mind for business, and if they thought she belonged behind a desk, that was fine by her. She would just make sure the desk had her name on it. She kept her grades high. Her essays were clean and sharp. Her math scores improved with each semester. She had fewer friends than ever, but the few she had knew her as someone serious, someone who worked hard, and someone who did not waste time. When the test results were released, Diana was pulled into the principal's office. Her guidance advisor was already seated, and both men looked at her with an expression she could not quite read. "You did very well," the principal said. Diana nodded once. "Second highest in the school," he continued. Her advisor folded his hands. "But you're not quite ready for a 4-year program," he said. "Your coursework hasn't been aligned with the university track. You've done more secretarial training and business applications. That matters on paper." Diana looked down at her hands. The principal spoke again. "There's an option. We can recommend you for the dual-credit community college program. You'd start college classes this spring while finishing high school credits." Diana did not respond right away. The offer was more than she had expected. It was also more complicated than it sounded. She knew the paperwork would require her father's signature. She knew he would never give it. Not for something like this. He still called college a scam and said it was a waste of money for girls. He told her she could get married or get a job after graduation, but she would not be allowed to waste her time with more school. She thanked them quietly and left the office with the paperwork in her backpack. That evening, Diana sat in her room with the form on the desk. Her brothers were loud in the living room. The TV was on. Her father was home early, already in one of his moods. She knew better than to ask for anything that night. She took out the form and read it again. The instructions were simple. Signatures were required from a school counselor and a parent or legal guardian. The counselor had already signed it. Her mother's signature was the only thing missing. Diana opened her drawer and pulled out an old envelope. Inside was a canceled check from the electric bill. She had saved it for months, just in case she ever needed it. Her mother's handwriting was neat and steady. Diana studied the signature for nearly an hour. Then she took out a sheet of scratch paper and began to practice. By the 5th attempt, it was close. By the 10th, it matched. The next morning, she signed the form with her mother's name and turned it in. She was not worried about getting caught. The college office staff would never know her mother's signature. They had no reason to doubt the paperwork. Diana had already spoken to a representative at the community college and gathered the necessary course listings. She registered for 3 classes beginning in January. She also submitted applications to 4-year universities, using her tutoring income to cover the fees. Her plan was simple. Graduate early, attend community college from January through August, and then transfer into a university by the fall. She had memorized every step. She had planned every move. Diana knew her father would find out eventually, but by then, it would be too late to stop her. College was important. More important than permission. She was not going to miss out. January came, and Diana's high school classes ended. She had graduated early, exactly as she planned. Her applications were in, her acceptance to community college had been processed, and her tuition had been paid in full from the savings she had hidden for over a year. She started classes the second week of January, showing up each morning with her books in one hand and her future in the other. But the moment her high school schedule ended, so did her tutoring income. The students she had been helping no longer needed her. A few promised to refer her to younger students, but none followed through. Without tutoring money, Diana had no income at all. Her diner hours had already been reduced to make room for college. She could not go back to full-time work without risking her classes. She began living on the edge of every dollar she had left. Then her final high school grade report arrived. She had forgotten it would be mailed. The envelope was delivered on a Wednesday afternoon, and Diana was still on the city bus when it landed in the mailbox. By the time she got home, her father was already waiting. The report was opened. He had seen the withdrawal date from high school and the notation that she had graduated early. He had seen the final transcript, and it did not include a spring schedule. He asked her where she had been going every day. Diana stayed silent. He asked again, louder. Still, she said nothing. Then came the blow. The sharp backhand she had felt too many times before. Her lip split against her teeth. Her head jerked sideways, and her shoulder struck the corner of the kitchen counter. He stood over her, breathing heavily, eyes burning with the rage of control slipping from his grasp. She got up. She did not cry. She walked past him, up the stairs, and into her room. She locked the door, pressed her back to it, and closed her eyes. That was the last straw. She lay awake most of the night. The silence of the house felt heavy and dangerous. Her bruised lip throbbed with every heartbeat. At 4 o'clock the next morning, before the sun had begun to rise, Diana got up. She dressed quietly. She packed her most important belongings in a backpack and a large canvas tote. Her books, her notebook, her class schedule, a sweatshirt, the ID card from the community college, her cash, still wrapped and tucked into the lining of her bag. She placed 2 cardboard boxes of less important items under the porch behind the house. She knew she could not carry them now. She might come back for them later. She might not. The YWCA in town opened early. Diana had passed it before. She had written the address in her notebook just in case this day ever came. When she arrived, her face was already swelling. Her lip was dark and tender. She could feel the bruise along her cheekbone rising beneath the skin. She walked to the front desk and asked for help. The woman behind the desk looked at her, then motioned gently for Diana to sit. The emergency shelter was full. The YWCA only had long-term spaces for women with children. But there was one temporary room available. It was in the emergency wing, the one used mostly by women coming in from the street. Diana accepted the offer. The room was small and sparse. 2 other women shared it. One spoke to herself softly in the dark. The other stared at the ceiling and did not respond when Diana introduced herself. Diana did not leave her things unattended, not even for a minute. Her backpack stayed with her. Her tote never left her side. The cash was still hidden deep within, but she checked on it often. She slept with her arm looped through the strap. This was not safety. Not yet. But it was freedom. For the first time in her life, Diana was not under her father's roof. She was not handing over her money. She was not being watched. She was not being silenced. The shelter was loud. The fluorescent lights flickered. The other women wept, mumbled, or shouted through the night. But Diana slept. It was not a peaceful sleep, but it was hers. In the 7th week of the term, Diana turned 18. There was no celebration. No cake. No cards. No one from her family called or came looking for her. She expected as much. She had not told anyone the date was approaching. She had not told anyone where she was staying. She had no reason to believe they would care. But still, it was a turning point. The morning of her birthday, Diana took the city bus to the bank and opened her first checking account. She handed over the paperwork, her student ID, and her community college registration documents. The teller asked if she wanted a debit card. She nodded. It felt like something small, but it was everything. For the first time in her life, her money belonged to her. She left the bank with the account information folded neatly in her bag and her name printed at the top of the paperwork. Not her father's name. Not a forged signature. Just hers. She also stopped looking over her shoulder. No one came after her. No one filed a report. No one tried to drag her back home. She had passed the invisible line between being a child and being a legal adult, and she could finally move in the open. Diana began spending more time on campus. She visited the library during the day and started helping other students again, this time through the tutoring center. It did not pay much, but it was consistent. A week after her birthday, she met a second-year student named Marissa in one of her classes. They got to talking, and Diana mentioned that she was staying at the shelter. Marissa hesitated, then said her current roommate was leaving at the end of the month. Rent was cheap. The apartment was small, but it was close to campus. Diana asked to see it. The place was no more than 600 square feet. The walls were thin. The carpet was old. The air conditioning worked when it felt like it. But it had a door that locked and a bathroom that she did not have to share with strangers. She said yes. The YWCA staff helped her fill out the housing paperwork and gave her a list of emergency resources in case the apartment fell through. She moved in the following Friday with her backpack, her tote, and the 2 boxes she had recovered from under her family's porch. It was not much, but it was hers. Diana took the smaller room in the apartment and unpacked in silence. She folded her few clothes into the dresser. She lined her books along the windowsill. She stored her important documents in a shoebox under the bed. That first night, she sat cross-legged on the floor with a bowl of noodles and watched the light from the hallway stretch across the living room. The silence felt strange at first. Not the tense silence of her father's house, but the soft quiet of absence. No shouting. No slamming doors. No one asking her where she had been. Just quiet. It took her a long time to fall asleep, but when she did, she slept without interruption. From the moment Diana began to live as an adult on her own, things just seemed to fall into place for her. Without her father's eyes watching her every move, without the shouting in the next room, without the demand to hand over her earnings at the end of each shift, Diana could finally think. She could finally breathe. Her life began to stretch out like a map. She made lists, and the lists became calendars. She tracked her credits and made careful spreadsheets to estimate when she could transfer. By the end of summer, she had completed 3/4 worth of classes. She was taking a full course load and working part-time at the campus library. Her schedule was tight, but she managed every hour of it with precision. That fall, she applied for a transfer program at a university in Texas and one in Maryland. She had chosen the Maryland school after reading about its digital archives initiative. The program was competitive, but she liked the way it combined research with community work. She liked that they were building something from scratch. By spring, she was nearly done with her general education requirements. Her GPA was above 3.9. She had letters of recommendation from 2 of her professors and a detailed essay explaining her interest in archival preservation. She mailed the applications and did not speak of them again. When the acceptance letter from Bancroft University arrived, she opened it at her desk alone. She read it once, then read it again. A full scholarship. She would not owe anything for tuition. There was even a housing stipend. Diana sat back in her chair and stared at the wall. She did not call anyone. She did not post about it online. She simply folded the letter, placed it in a folder marked Fall Plans, and went back to work. That August, she boarded a plane for Maryland with 2 suitcases and 1 carry-on. Bancroft was larger than she expected. The buildings were old and covered in ivy. The library was housed in a stone structure with wide steps and stained glass windows. Her dorm room was small, but it was clean, and no one told her when to sleep or what to wear or where to go. She worked hard through college. Harder than most. She took a double major in library science and American studies. She attended office hours. She finished papers a week early. She worked in the university library 2 evenings a week and at the coffee shop near campus on weekends. She barely had a social life. It was not that she was unfriendly. It was that she could not afford to lose focus. Not now. Not when she had come this far. Parties felt dangerous to her. Late nights made her uneasy. She never drank. Sometimes she would sit in the student union and watch the other students laugh and sprawl across the couches with their phones and their easy voices. She wondered how it would feel to be like that. Unworried. Unburdened. Certain that someone would catch you if you fell. Diana had no one to catch her. So she did not fall. When she did date, things never seemed to go right. Most of the boys she met were charming at first. They liked that she was smart. They said they admired her drive. But soon, it always changed. They became needy or impatient. They expected her to take care of their schedules or help them with their resumes. They joked about her being too serious or too responsible. One boyfriend stayed over 3 nights a week and never offered to pay for groceries. Another borrowed her car and returned it with the gas tank empty. A third talked constantly about his dreams but never made it to class on time. Her roommates called them hobosexuals. They were attractive and sweet-talking and always seemed to need just a little help, a place to stay, a meal, a reminder to submit their financial aid paperwork. Diana ended each relationship the same way, quietly, without drama. She would stop answering texts and after a few days, they would disappear. She learned not to expect anything from them. They did not build. They took. She did not need this, she was building. She held 2 degrees, one in information science and the other, a master of library and information science. She had built a career through discipline, sacrifice, and hard work. She had made a name for herself in professional circles where no one expected to see someone like her. She had become head of library and information resources at the Hampton Bay Naval Academy, managing people, systems, and information with skill and vision. But now she was out of work. Her last relationship had cost her more than time. It had cost her credibility. And eventually, it had cost her the job she had worked years to earn. She sat on her sofa, the city lights outside reflected across the glass windows of her condo. The silence in the room was thick, but not unfamiliar. She had lived with silence before. She knew how to survive it. She was already updating her resume. She had made a list of institutions to contact. She had 3 mentors willing to write letters of recommendation. She would find another job. That much was certain. What was not certain was how she would finally learn to stop choosing the wrong men. She had always known how to work. She had always known how to stretch a dollar, how to meet deadlines, how to impress a room. But when it came to relationships, she had one blind spot that kept returning like a bruise that never healed. She did not know how to recognize a decent man. Over the years, she had chosen charm over substance, soft words over consistent actions. She had confused attention with care. Every time, she ended up with someone who wanted to be taken care of, not someone who could stand beside her. This last one had been the final lesson. A smart man, successful on paper, polite in meetings, and attentive in private. But in the end, he had looked out only for himself. He had used the relationship when it benefited him and walked away without warning when it became inconvenient. She had protected him for too long. She had believed he was different. Now she knew better. She stood up and crossed the room to her desk. The latest job listing sat open on her laptop, a position at a digital preservation institute in D.C. It was not quite what she wanted, but it was a start. She saved the listing, then opened a blank document. At the top, she typed, "What I will not ignore again." Below that, she wrote a list. This situation was not about jobs. It was about men. She wrote clearly, without emotion. She made a plan the same way she had always made all her plans, with precision. She would trust her instincts next time. She would not explain away red flags. She would not carry the weight for 2 people just to feel less alone. She would rebuild her career. That was inevitable. But more than that, she would learn how to protect the parts of herself that no title or degree had ever safeguarded. This time, her first priority was learning to read the people who entered her life, especially the men who smiled easily and offered nothing of real value. This ends our story. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like, share this story, and subscribe to our channel. Also, be sure to stop by for more stories each week. You can find Hampton Bay books at online book retailers. For more information about the Hampton Bay books, visit denisenicholsbooks.com.